All right, so you're prepping for your medical coding certification exams.
And diving deep into respiratory procedures.
We're going to unearth the strategy behind AMCI's facts to remember.
I feel like cheat codes, distilling those massive AMA CPT guidelines into testable gold.
It's like they took this huge textbook and condensed it down to the essential study guide.
Exactly. And these facts to remember, or FTRs, as we'll call them, are crucial for anyone prepping for the exam.
Yeah, it's like having a roadmap for exactly what they're looking for.
Think of them as your secret weapon.
Ooh, I like that.
For tackling those tricky coding questions.
Okay, so we're using the AMCI Respiratory System FTRs document.
Yes.
And right off the bat,
right away,
they emphasize how sinus endoscopy codes work.
Mm-hmm.
What's the key takeaway there?
Well, what's fascinating here is that inspecting the nasal cavity is considered part of the sinus endoscopy procedure.
Oh, okay.
It's bundled.
Oh, so you wouldn't code them separately?
Exactly. You wouldn't code them separately.
Okay.
It's all bundled together.
Got it. So it's not just about knowing the individual codes, but understanding these bundled procedures.
Absolutely.
The FTRs are like, don't fall for that trap on the exam.
Exactly. And that's where these FTRs shine. They're designed to help you avoid common coding pitfalls, especially those that often pop up on exams.
Okay, speaking of pitfalls.
Yes.
The FTRs also clarify when you'd need a modifier.
Right.
To indicate a procedure outside the bundle.
Outside the bundle, that's right.
They specifically mention modifier 52.
Yes, modifier 52.
Let's say only a portion of a sinus endoscopy was performed.
Okay.
That's when you'd use modifier 52 to signify it wasn't the full procedure.
It wasn't the complete procedure.
The FTRs make it crystal clear when and how to apply these modifiers.
Crystal clear.
Oh.
They lay it all out for you.
It's like they're giving you a secret decoder ring for the exam.
I like that.
Now, what about laryngoscopy?
Laryngoscopy.
The FTRs have some interesting points about coding for paired structures.
Yes. This is a bit counterintuitive, but even though you're examining both sides of the larynx, it's coded as a single procedure.
Really?
Because paired structures are considered unilateral.
Wait, so even though there are two vocal cords,
yes,
we code it as one.
You code it as one.
That's a good example of where the FTRs help you think like the exam writers.
Absolutely. They're highlighting those nuances that might trip you up if you're just relying on memorization.
Okay, let's move on to bronchoscopies.
Bronchoscopies.
The FTRs emphasize a key difference between diagnostic and therapeutic bronchoscopies, right?
Right. If a bronchoscopy is performed for diagnostic purposes only, fluoroscopy is considered bundled into the main procedure code.
Okay.
But if they do anything therapeutic, like removing a foreign body or using a laser, then it's coded separately.
So if it's purely for looking around?
Yeah, just looking around.
The fluoroscopy is included. But if they start zapping things,
then it's a separate code.
That's a separate code.
Exactly.
The FTRs make that distinction clear.
Very clear.
Which is essential for accurate coding.
Absolutely.
Can you see how these FTRs are going to be your secret weapon for the exam?
Absolutely. They really streamline your studying by focusing on the most testable points.
It's like they analyzed past exams and identified the areas where students tend to struggle.
That's a great point.
Now let's talk about lung biopsies.
Lung biopsies.
The FTRs break down various approaches like VATS and open procedures.
Yes, different approaches.
What are the main coding considerations there?
The key point is that if a biopsy is performed during a more extensive procedure like a lobectomy, it's often bundled into that main procedure's code and wouldn't be coded separately.
So it's that bundled concept again, but on a bigger scale?
On a larger scale, yes.
And the FTRs make sure you don't overcode in these situations.
Exactly. They're highlighting the specific scenarios you need to be aware of for the exam.
Okay, what about lung transplants?
Lung transplant.
I imagine the coding for those can get pretty complex.
It can, but the FTRs simplify it by emphasizing that you only code for the procedures performed during the transplant. For instance, you'd code for the removal of the diseased lung, the backbench work to prepare the donor lung.
Hold on, backbench work?
Yes, backbench work.
What is that?
So backbench work refers to the preparation of the donor lung outside of the body, getting it ready for implantation.
Got it.
And the FTRs remind us to code each step distinctly.
So it's like a lung spa day before the transplant.
Yes.
I love it. All right, let's talk about pulmonary function tests.
Pulmonary function tests, or PFTs.
Or PFTs.
Yes.
What do the FTRs highlight regarding these tests?
They provide a concise overview of the different types of PFTs.
Okay.
From spirometry to lung volume tests, diffusion studies, and bronchodilator responsiveness testing.
Okay, so if a PFT question pops up on the exam, the FTRs are like, don't panic, we got you.
Exactly. They've got your back, providing the key information you need to know about PFT coding.
As we go through this, it seems like the FTRs are really emphasizing the importance of knowing your anatomy.
Anatomy is key.
What stands out to you?
What's really striking me is how the FTRs remind us of seemingly basic anatomical details that are crucial for accurate coding.
Okay.
Like remembering that the right lung has 3 lobes and the left lung has only 2.
Yeah, that seems so simple.
It does.
But it's easy to overlook in the heat of the exam.
Absolutely, especially when you're under pressure.
It's like they're saying, don't forget the basics, even when things get complicated.
Exactly, and that attention to detail is what can make or break your coding accuracy.
All right, what other anatomical pearls of wisdom do these FTRs have for us?
Well, they also clarify that lung segments are simply parts of lobes.
Okay.
So if you encounter a procedure description mentioning a specific lung segment, it's referring to a portion of a lobe.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a hierarchy, lung, then lobe, then segment.
And the FTRs provide that clear roadmap.
They do. They guide you through the anatomy.
So we've covered bundled procedures modifiers.
Yes.
Specific respiratory procedures like bronchoscopies and biopsies.
Right.
Key anatomical details.
It's important details.
Is there anything else these FTRs cover that we haven't touched on yet?
Yes. There's one more crucial concept they clarify.
Okay.
The distinction between separate procedures that are integral to a comprehensive procedure and those that are not.
Okay.
This is where modifier 59 comes into play.
Ooh, modifier 59.
Modifier 59.
That's what I always hear coders getting tripped up on.
It's a tricky one.
What insights do the FTRs offer about this modifier?
They do a great job of demystifying modifier 59.
Okay, good.
They explain that if a procedure is considered an integral part of a more comprehensive service, it's bundled.
Okay.
However, if a separate procedure is performed, that's not integral to that comprehensive service. You would use modifier 59 to indicate it should be coded separately.
So if a procedure is like the opening act for the main event.
I like that.
It's bundled.
Bundled.
But if it's a totally separate concert.
Separate concept.
Then modifier 59 is our signal.
Exactly. Modifier 59 signals that separation.
And the FTRs lay out that logic in a way that's easy to understand and apply.
Easy to understand and apply.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Bundled procedures, modifiers, specific respiratory procedures like bronchoscopies and biopsies.
Right.
Key anatomical details.
Yeah.
And even that tricky modifier 59.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It's incredible how much these FTRs simplify the complex world of respiratory coding.
They really do. They highlight the essential points and eliminate the fluff.
Yes.
Making them a truly valuable resource for exam preparation.
It's like having a coding sensei guiding us through the tricky terrain.
I like that analogy.
And warning us about potential dangers.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, what are you finding most fascinating as we go through these FTRs?
What's really standing out to me is how they emphasize the interconnectedness of the coding system.
Okay.
It's not just about memorizing individual codes. It's about understanding how those codes relate to each other.
Right.
And to the underlying medical concepts.
So it's not just about knowing the what, but also the why behind the coding decisions.
Exactly. And that deeper understanding is what sets apart a skilled coder.
Okay, I'm feeling super energized and ready for more.
Me too.
But before we dive into the next layer of this coding onion,
let's
take a quick breather.
Okay.
And give our listeners a chance to process all this amazing information.
That's good.
We'll be back in a flash to explore even more respiratory coding secrets.
More secrets.
With the help of AMCI's incredible FTRs.
Can't wait. Welcome back to our deep dive into respiratory coding.
I feel like we've already unearthed a treasure trove of exam-worthy tips from those AMCI facts to remember.
We have. It's incredible how much they pack into those FTRs.
Yeah, my brain is still buzzing from all those insights about bundled procedures.
Right.
And those tricky modifiers.
Yeah, those modifiers can be tricky.
It's like the FTRs are giving us a secret decoder ring for the exam.
I like that analogy.
Speaking of modifiers, let's revisit Modifier 59.
Modifier 59.
It seems to be a recurring theme of the respiratory FTRs.
It does pop up quite a bit, doesn't it?
Modifier 59, the coding chameleon that keeps popping up.
Right. It's always lurking around.
The FTRs did a great job at breaking it down, though.
They really did. They simplified it beautifully.
Okay, help me solidify this. Let's say a patient has a bronchoscopy.
Right, a bronchoscopy.
And the physician decides to biopsy a completely different area of the lung.
Okay, a separate area.
Would that be a modifier 59 situation?
It could be if the biopsy site is totally unrelated to the bronchoscopy and it's considered a separate procedure, then modifier 59 would be the correct choice to signal that it should be coded separately.
Ah, so it's like the biopsy is taking a detour,
Yeah.
a separate mission from the main bronchoscopy procedure.
Exactly. Modifier 59 helps us distinguish those separate procedures and ensures accurate coding.
This is making a lot more sense now. What other respiratory coding nuances do the FTRs illuminate?
Well, let's talk about scopes.
The scopes, okay.
The FTRs clearly differentiate between diagnostic scopes used for visualization and surgical scopes used for operative procedures.
So the diagnostic scope is like the scout.
Like a scout.
Assessing the situation, while the surgical scope is the heavy-duty equipment for the main operation.
I like that analogy, and here's a key takeaway. The FTRs point out that diagnostic scopes are often bundled into the surgical scope.
Okay, bundled again.
Unless they are coded separately using, you guessed it, modifier 59.
Modifier 59 strikes again.
It's a powerful tool.
It really is the ninja of the coding world.
It is, and the FTRs are our guides, showing us when to call upon the ninja's services.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yes.
These FTRs aren't just about memorizing codes, they're teaching us how to think like a coder.
That's a great point. They're developing your analytical skills, which is crucial for success in this field.
Okay, what other coding pearls do these FTRs have up their sleeve?
They specifically address image guidance for biopsies.
Okay.
Emphasizing that it's usually bundled into the biopsy code.
So if a physician uses imaging like ultrasound or CT to guide a biopsy, we don't code that imaging separately.
In most cases, no. The FTRs are reminding us that image guidance is considered an essential part of the biopsy procedure itself.
It's like the imaging is the trusty sidekick, helping the biopsy needle hit its target.
Exactly, and the coding reflects that partnership.
It's fascinating how these FTRs highlight the logic behind the codes.
The logic is key.
They're like little coding puzzles that make the process so much clearer.
They make it fun almost.
Okay, before we get too carried away with our coding epiphanies,
all right,
let's take a step back. What does all this tell us about the nature of medical coding?
The nature of medical coding.
Why is understanding the logic behind codes so crucial?
That's a great question. Medical coding goes beyond just assigning codes.
Okay.
It's about interpreting medical documentation, understanding procedures, and then translating that information into a standardized language for billing research and public health tracking.
Wow, so it's really the bridge between the medical world and the administrative world.
Precisely, and that's why understanding the logic is so important. You need to know why the codes exist, how they relate to each other, and when to use them.
It's like being a coding detective, piecing together the clues to ensure accurate representation of the care provided.
I love that it's about seeing the bigger picture and understanding how all these pieces fit together.
All right, we've covered scopes, image guidance, and even delved into the deeper purpose of medical coding.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
What else from these FTRs is particularly noteworthy?
Well, there's a section dedicated to highlighting common coding errors.
Oh, this is good.
It's like they've compiled a list of traps to avoid on the exam.
Everyone loves a good cautionary tale. What kind of coding errors are they warning us about?
One common error is incorrectly coding for bilateral procedures.
Okay.
For example, coding for a bronchoscopy of each lung separately when it should be coded as a single procedure.
Ah, so going back to that idea of paired structures being considered unilateral.
Exactly.
The FTRs are really hammering that concept home.
It's important to remember.
So they're not only teaching us the right way to code, but they're also pointing out the common pitfalls to avoid.
The things to watch out for.
That's incredibly helpful for exam prep.
Absolutely. It's like they've analyzed past exams and identified the areas where students tend to struggle.
It's like having a coding sensei guiding us through the tricky terrain and warning us about potential dangers.
I love that analogy. And speaking of guidance, the FTRs also provide some helpful tips for navigating the CPT manual itself.
Wait, there are tips for using the CPT manual?
There are.
That sounds like insider information. What kind of tips are we talking about?
They highlight the importance of paying attention to the guidelines at the beginning of each section, using the index to quickly locate codes, and cross-referencing to ensure accuracy.
So it's not just about knowing the codes, it's about knowing how to use the CPT manual effectively.
Exactly. It's like they're giving you a cheat sheet for navigating that massive book.
This is amazing. I'm feeling so much more confident about tackling the CPT manual now.
That's great to hear, and I think it highlights the value of these FTRs.
Yeah.
They're not just about respiratory coding, they're about developing good coding habits in general.
Okay, before we get too carried away with our CPT manual mastery, let's take another quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up this respiratory coding adventure with some final insights from the FTRs and some broader takeaways for our listeners. Okay, we're back for the final leg of our respiratory coding deep dive.
It's amazing how these AMCI facts to remember really break it all down.
I know. I feel like I have a whole new arsenal of coding knowledge thanks to those FTRs.
It's like they give you the exact roadmap you need for the exam.
And it's not just about memorizing codes.
Yeah.
It's like they're not just teaching us the what, but the why behind the coding decisions.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the logic of the coding system.
So is there anything else in those FTRs that really highlights that deeper understanding?
Well, they repeatedly stress understanding the intent behind the codes.
Okay.
It's not just about mechanically assigning codes.
Right.
It's about accurately capturing the essence of the medical care provided.
So it's like we're not just coders, but storytellers.
Yeah.
Using codes to create narratives of these medical encounters.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
We're translating those complex procedures into a standardized language that everyone from insurance companies to researchers can understand.
So we're like the bridge between the medical world and the administrative world.
Precisely. And that's why understanding the intent is so crucial.
Right.
It allows us to create accurate and meaningful representations of the care that was delivered.
Okay, so we've explored bundled procedures.
Yes.
Modifiers, those tricky lung biopsies, Modifier 59, and even the philosophical side of coding intent.
We've covered a lot of ground.
What's the biggest takeaway for our listeners as they gear up for their exams?
The key takeaway is this. AMCI's facts to remember are more than just a collection of facts.
Right.
They're a roadmap to mastering the logic of the coding system.
I like that.
By focusing on the FTRs, you're developing a framework for approaching any coding challenge you might encounter.
It's like they're not just teaching us to code, they're teaching us to think like coders.
Exactly. And that skill will be invaluable throughout your entire coding career.
Okay, so we focused specifically on respiratory procedures today.
We did.
But what broader insights from these FTRs can our listeners apply to medical coding in general?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of seeking out resources that simplify complex information without sacrificing accuracy.
Right, because medical coding is so vast.
It is.
And it's constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
But resources like the FTRs make it manageable.
They make it much easier to grasp.
They break down the essentials in a way that's clear, concise, and exam-focused.
It's exactly what you need to succeed.
So they're not just a shortcut to exam success. They're a foundation for building a successful coding career.
They are indeed. They empower you to confidently navigate the coding landscape and become a true coding master.
Well said. And with the help of these FTRs, our listeners are well on their way. Happy coding, everyone.